we typically have like a list of projects, right? So when you download Hop, you get two projects by default. You get the samples project and a default project. That is not a bad thing. So you get started. The downside of that is let's start with let's suppose you install Hop in up Hop, which is in my case a symbolic link, but so you get like a default project in your config folder. And this is what Hop uses. It uses this hop config JSON file, and this is the default file, right? So it has the default project here, which lives in the relative folder projects default and sample. So this is where you will work if you just accept the default settings of Hop. Now, obviously, suppose that you want to upgrade Hop, you download a new version, 1.1, 1.2, 2.0, whatever. You start from scratch again. So that's not a great way of doing things, right? So in my case, I'm not using these files. I've set a couple of hop variables, and the first one to take note of is the hop config folder. And in that config folder, we store the configuration file. So another hop config. So if I go to hop mat tmp config hop config.json, this is where all my environment variables are stored. Um, this is the default locale selection, some GUI properties, my defaults, credentials for Google Drive. So all the plugins have access to storing information that they find relevant, like the Google Drive VFS driver. The project's setup is also a plugin, so they can write to this one as well. And as you can see, here are all the plugins. Here are all the projects that I defined in the GUI, right? So this is that list. And what that is there's no real data in here. It's just pointers to the folders. So this is how that gets bootstrapped. So if you look at a project called Hop2, for example, to Hop2, this is one of my many tests and fiddle projects, I guess. And so this is the content of that. It inherits from another project, base project, where a lot of the central metadata is stored that I use. This is like default, right? And the configuration where this information is stored is called project config.json. So typically you just concatenate these two things, and that gives you the configuration file of the project. There are no variables defined. We usually keep these things like pretty standard, right? That is a first best practice. Move your hop config file somewhere where you feel uh, where you feel it might be more resilient to change, right? Maybe you can check in this file into a Git repository or something like that. Maybe you can back it up during your regular backups, and then you can exclude the whole binary of Hop because that's never going to be relevant. You can just download another copy from the web. You don't have to back that up. And if you start messing with the install, that's different, right? So that's the first thing. You might have also noticed that when I change one project to another, uh, that Hop Gui remembers where things were left off, the open tabs, and even if you change the zoom or something, it will remember, right? So Hop2 and go back. So the zoom is remembered, and I think even the scroll bars or whatever, that information is stored somewhere as well. So then we can look at the second folder um, that we can configure, and that's the audit folder. So in my case, hop audit folder, and the first one was hop config folder. And this was all documented on the website, but we thought it might be useful to just line it up. So in here you will find all the projects that I ever used and Hop 2, and you will find um, lists of files, things it remembers, and it's perfectly safe to just delete that information on a regular basis, clean it up. Nothing bad's going to happen. This is just usage advice, right? The most recent files, all those sorts of things, the stuff that you searched for in the past, so that you don't have to retype it. That's where this bucket is being used for. All right. If you're setting environment variables and you're using JDBC drivers, you can also set a shared JDBC driver folder so that you don't have to copy like Oracle or special drivers or whatever that you need into the binary of Hop. Again, it's easier that way. Then you don't have to worry about copying drivers all over the place. Hop will go pick it up in that folder, and that makes it again easier to just upgrade the binaries. So there's those three. A third one that you can actually quite easily see in the Hop scripts. So let's say Hop run, for example. Um, so all of them have Hop options. All of them check Hop options. So it's one option, like Hop options can be set for all scripts if you want. Usually for me in this case, 2 gigs is more than enough. Um, if until my new laptop arrives in a few weeks, I will not be changing that. Maybe after that I will up it a bit, but you can set like a whole set of options in the Hop options, like define environment variables on the Java virtual machine, add more Java options, whatever, right? And those can be picked up as well. So that's one I might recommend that you set as well for production use cases on a server, for example. So those four variables uh, before you get started. Um, and then um, I think it's time to look at these projects, and let's take a cool one. Um, So this is a big one I've been working on recently. This is a migration of a project from Kettle that I did for my brother-in-law, actually. And it's a project that went on for more than 10 years. And so this has been running for a while now in production on Hop. And so we can take a look at um, best practices. First thing is everything is stored in version control in Git. So there's not even a DAO. Everything needs to be version controlled. It's easier to revert files to see changes um, to files. You can get basically a lot of information. There's visual differentials available. So many options, right? So make use of that. Um, it's so easy to do. Just install Git, make a free account on GitHub. They allow private repositories. There's not really no question, right? Uh, Second thing to realize is that if you have a project, everything can be contained in a single folder. So even for a large project like this, everything is contained in a single folder. Even the scripts, the shell scripts that run on the server, everything is in a single folder, which makes it easy to just check everything in and version control and check it out on the server. The problem then is like, okay, so I'm developing locally and I need to be able to say I have a bunch of environment variables set for my local environment. Um, and these are used throughout the whole project. Uh, and so I call this the name of whatever, and this file is not checked into Git, right? So you can also store this in a separate folder with all the environment files for many projects you might have, and check that into a private Git repository somewhere else. So that's a good practice as well that you can do, so that you never lose that work. Um, so let's take a look at um, let's see. Yeah, maybe on the environment. So if you have any project, let's so this is a project I just got started with this week, and this is critical vulnerabilities export. This is a critical vulnerabilities file format. It's an XML file format where all software critical vulnerabilities are stored in, and Neo4j is also working with that, like any other software vendor. So, okay, so I said, okay, so let's do a quick test. There's a big file with XML in it that we need to parse and load into Neo4j. First thing I do is like, okay, so I need a connection to Neo4j, right? So the CVE graph model, or you might be doing a new connection to a MySQL database or to Oracle or the relational database. And the first thing you want to do is, oh, I'm going to specify host name, the database, the port, whatever. Well, at that point, you should have the reflex of saying, I am going to create an environment, right? And in this case, I might want to call this local, or whatever. You can create as many environments as you want for any given project. So I call this development. You can give it another name, and I can even create a new uh, file, right, for local. And by default, it takes the parent folder of wherever you're working, right? Um, so now I have a new one, and I can say I'm going to create a new one. So this is how easy that is, right? I need a host name, and let's get local host maybe in this case, the host name, and so on and so on and so on. So it's very easy to create these environments. It takes all of like 2 minutes, and then I have a environment for maybe a local Neo4j database that I may be running in a Docker container. And then I have another one that is my default one that goes to my Mercury server here, which is sitting a few meters away from me. And if you make any changes, it reloads automatically, and it just makes sure that all the variables that you define are nicely updated, even in the metadata. And then you can just say, okay, I'm testing this, right? So that makes it very easy to just always just need one database connection or any metadata item only once for your environment. There's never any need anymore to oh, I'm going to test this against another database. I'm going to change the database connection, or like the way it was in Kettle, I need to change the Kettle properties file with the variables, and I need to shut down the tool, restart it again. So all of that is not needed anymore. It's become a really powerful tool for managing these, yeah, sometimes complicated environments, right? This also means that, yeah, you have a dynamic server, you fire it up, some address changed, just go into the environment, change it, and once you hit OK, it will ask you to reload the project, and all the variables and all the tabs and all the metadata objects that you have in your GUI will be reloaded automatically. So yeah, so for questions, before we go on, I just want to see whether or not I haven't missed anything glaringly obvious. Bart, do you see anything in the chat or any
No,
that want to
nothing
speak?
yet.
Okay, all right. Um, so, um, what we find, what I find particularly annoying is, and I just did a project where like 7 or 8 different people worked on uh, for 10 years, more than 10 years. And so what you get is that the naming scheme of all the workflows and pipelines, if they get migrated from Kettle, or the same will happen in Hop, right? So if you start working with a larger project, it becomes excruciating. Um, so what I would recommend is to stick to a naming scheme, and I would recommend people not to use any spaces in their file names, because what happens if you put spaces in these file names, internally they get converted into URLs basically, and all the spaces get converted into percentage 20, and those file names then become something like percentage 20 in there. And in these tabs you will also see the percentage 20, because it takes like the base file name of a VFS file name, a URI. So stick to one particular naming scheme that you can come up with, and you will see the column the columns come back into your project this way, right? So it's a very simple thing to do for these, maybe say 150 workflows and pipelines. It took me maybe like an hour or so to go through them, rename them, check where the reference was made. If you are dealing with any of these migration projects, or these renames, and you want to see where something was used, you can always do something like this, right? Uh, or even uh, have a string like this and just search for it. And with a bit of luck, your favorite tool will just pick that up and say, okay, uh, so the file name here, and then it will. But if there's more than one location besides just this spot, you can just go back to the find file and just change it there as well. And once you've moved to a single file name scheme that is simple and straightforward, just stick to it, reinforce it regularly, take a look at it, and just take your time, half an hour, to just push it back into the right order. Another thing that I noticed, and this is more, yeah, around. Let me just open that up. I hope you guys can see this. I think there. Oops. Let's say. Let's call this the daily backup, right? So daily backup is a workflow that runs. So if you have a script called daily backup, make it call a workflow flow called daily backup, and if you put in a file, give it the same name. That makes it easy for DevOps people later on to just figure out what's going on, right? Or for the simple case, okay, I just want to put my log file somewhere. It's simple, and I am migrating that log file to Neo4j later on. But um, you know, not everybody is as lucky to work in a GUI. In this particular case, um, the server runs through a tunnel somewhere, and I don't have access to the GUI, so I have to do everything from the server. And there's a hop server involved, and there's a lot of moving parts. So make things as simple as possible so that you can recognize the processes that are running, where they are logging to, and which script is executing. Just make your life easy. Uh, so this is part of a naming scheme, right? So set this up from the get-go, and you know, and don't log files all over the place. Don't log in 15 subfolders. Just somewhere simple, right? Another thing that I mentioned in passing is that I will not use any success actions in any of these workflows. Nor will I be using any aborts. So if you have something like this, right? This is a design pattern that I see on occasion. Uh, Feel free to do so, but it doesn't really do anything. Uh, if this thing is failing, if any of these are failing, the workflow is already set in a failed state. It's already being flagged as an error. There's no need to do an extra abort. Uh, the only thing where that might make sense if you have two or three of these items where you might want to send an email or so. But typically, it's better to just elevate this workflow to a higher level, and then you can just do copy workflow as an action. Let's take a new workflow. Um, so this one, and then handle this case by sending a mail, for example, in case something goes wrong. And this obviously is cleaner, fewer errors, keeps the workflows small and tidy. So this is one of the best practices for project setups. Don't put too many workflow items in a single workflow because it makes it harder to see what's going on, and it makes it harder to run the separate parts when you're developing. Right? For these actions, we actually ask the user, do you want to rename the action to match the file name? Um, and so that is great, right? But if you have, let's say, another one, um, let's call it this one. Typically, you would have a transform called graph output. So this is how it's called originally, but it makes so much more sense to just rename it, do a quick rename. Again, more like a best practice item, but I fail to see how you can do projects without, and keeping them maintainable without that sort of uh, best practice. Yeah. So if you've done all these things that I just mentioned, you're already like in the uh, top 95th percentile of people that are doing the right thing. So great job. And if not, consider doing these. We're at the half hour. Any questions about this so far, Bart? Um,
No,
I'm
it's
wondering.
crystal clear, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite simple, but yeah. Um, the default setup of Hop was done for convenience and for exposing the samples. But the next thing that I want to show you is that uh, by having the ability to set a Hop config folder variable, it also makes it very easy to run whole projects, let's say on a Docker container or for integration testing. So what we've done for example, the transformation integration tests. Um, so maybe I can just uh, go there for a second. Bear with me, right? So this is incubator hub. Integration tests, transforms. So this is the transforms folder integration test list. And so the goal of this, just to for those people that are not with us, the goal is that these integration tests run every night. And in this case, we have like a whole list of transforms that we test every night. And if somebody messes something up or we make a change, like Sergio has been really cool in fixing issues, and then he found one in the group by transform. So he added an extra test to the group by workflow, and we can find this one uh, group by. Yeah, I don't know which one but this is the basics, the transform, and then there is the main group by one. There you go. So this is running all the tests, and so you can choose which test to open. So this is how this is structured. So typically we would say if you run in a Docker container, well, we have hop config which allows you to point your project to a certain folder. So we have a script called hopconfig create project, create environment, set everything right, and then you can start running things. Um, in this case, it's actually quite a bit easier because, hang on, because we actually have a hopconfig folder, a hopconfig file in here. You just jump to the bottom here for a second, and in that hopconfig file, uh, we just have one project, and the project home is the config folder, which is defined by a script that runs, and it's a default project. And the environment config file, in here, we can put stuff like I think for database, JSON, def environment. Yeah, there's some that have like variables for connection details. I think Neo4j might have one. The yeah, the default ports is just ABCD for the Docker container that we briefly start up to run the integration test with. So this makes it very easy to have this whole self-contained project. There's no setup or anything. You just uh, point your environment. You just set one variable and everything follows automatically. And this is very convenient for these kinds of setups, where you just, hey, I just want to point and shoot. I don't want to be developing other stuff. And so again, you can consider this like to do this in this one self-contained project, if all that's ever going to be is a one self-contained project. And as you can see, I can still open this project simply by pointing um, the my environment to that folder. As the hopconfig file is never going to be changed by this project, right? So on the subject of uh, migrating things and loops uh, in these workflows, so there were a lot of old, um, how should I say this? Old design patterns where you would say, okay, so I have 10 files I need to loop over, or 20 uh, partners that this company works with, or whatever, right? 20 FTP folders or stuff like that. In those scenarios, um, you typically have something like, I have a bunch of export partners, transport partners, and then you had copy rows to result in the next workflow. And this, I guess, after this one, you would have the actual loop, and so it all takes about 10 minutes, 5 minutes to change that, right? You basically replace copy rows to result with a workflow executor. You map the input fields directly to the parameters that your bound already have if you did the right thing, and that's all it took in my case. So make sure to do that sort of work. It will yeah, make things more transparent, easier. And as a bonus, if you want to parallelize, you can do that quite easily then with this approach, right? You can say, okay, I'm gonna process four partners at the same time if there were to be a performance problem with this, but there isn't. I think if most people would do it like this, then they would do themselves a favor. Yeah.
There are a couple of questions now, Matt.
All right, cool.
Can you show your Git setup? And I think, well, if it doesn't show any passwords, I think the question is, do you have any clear text Git passwords in your configuration?
No.
No, no. Perfect.
So I don't use Git passwords. Uh, I have like a key that I generated. So keygen, I think, right? An RSA. So this public key is registered with GitHub in this case, so that if I do git status, git fetch upstream master, which is one of the things that you do to get the latest stuff from Git. I'm automatically authenticated using this public key. So this is a very easy setup. It doesn't really take that long, and it's well documented. Um, so no Git passwords, nothing. This works for private and public repositories. Yeah, quite easy to do. I hope that somewhat answers the question. And for GitHub, you can do this.
No. Hi, Matt. No, not the key part. I get that.
All right.
Uh, is it in the same area as the GFS where you set those things up? For Hop.
So for Hop, so this you mean the that it picks up the Git folder?
Yeah. Where do you?
You don't have to do anything. So if Hop finds a .git folder in the project home folder, it will automatically start showing these enabling these menu bars.
Oh,
And it
okay.
will in the past in Kettle we had like a Git project, but that's not needed anymore because yeah we can do this smarter, right? We can say, oh, there's a Git project, a .git file with a config folder in there, so we know everything that we need to know, and the libraries read this, and the API just starts to work. Yeah.
Okay. That's why I missed it, because it just did it automatically.
Yeah, we probably should be doing that smarter. I think it's just, so in this case, for example, it just checks this folder, right? So I think I just ran a git init in here, so it's easy to test. But yeah, that's pretty much for IT transforms, for example, which is also showing up. So I guess somebody fixed that issue where it didn't search in the parent folders. Lo and behold. So yeah, so that is pretty cool, right? So if there are any revisions, you probably can see, the changes then and stuff like that. But typically, yeah, we try to look for a .git config folder. Any other questions?
Yeah. Parent-child projects.
Yeah,
Well, the
great
question
question.
is about deployment and how is one project aware of, well, how is a child project aware of the parent project, vice versa. And Enrico says, I found it difficult to use parent-child projects with Docker.
Parent-child projects. So you have like base project, right? So it's quite easy. So if I'm in project Hop 2, and I have to specify that inheriting things from a project means metadata objects, right? So you have, let's say here, a local uh, pipeline run configuration. If you have 20 projects, you don't want to copy these local.json files all over the place, right? So you create it once and then you inherit from that base project. And if you mouse over uh, the tab, you can see where this is stored, right? I think there is a Jira case out there to also list this somewhere in the GUI more explicitly. But since we know where the information is coming from, you can edit this and it will update the information in the base project. If it's stored in a base project, it will store it, update it in your current loaded project. Um, so metadata and variables that you might have defined are inherited, but it's mostly for metadata because there are certain things you don't want to recreate over and over and over again. So quite a simple setup, and this is handled internally by the multi metadata repository, which is can just add more metadata sources for any given setup. And this works for Hop Around, for Hop Gui, for all scenarios. Quite useful. All right. So we can go to base project. I don't know if I have it even. I think this is an old one. So base project, I think it's project default here. And so there's a local here, and then I can create a new project called, what are we going to call it? Stuff Hop Hangout. And home folder is test stuff. Hop Hangout. And I'm going to, oh, the default is Hop. Let's inherit from default. Not at this moment. And I can still see these locals. So they're still defined, right? And yeah, go over here and see the same. So sort of like that. That's sort of like the idea, but it's quite simple in structure. Nothing magical about it. You don't have to use it. In the end, we're talking about a few JSON files of a few hundred bytes. They're quite small, I guess, right? You know, if you have these metadata objects, what is that? A few hundred bytes? Not that big of a deal. Great question. Thanks. Any others
Not so far. Anyone?
or anything else unrelated?
I do want to add because you were also mentioning the Docker part in your question, Enrico. I believe our default Docker image has no support for, well, not out of the box for the parent-child project. You register one project
Yeah.
when running the image, so there's no way to load multiple, configure multiple projects on that image and then link them to each other. in one go. So you'll have to make a custom image to do that.
That would be pretty hard to do actually, because the multi-level, well, it's not just one parent project. You can have multiple levels of parent projects, and that would be pretty hard to put into one generic image that would work for everyone, I guess. So there is a bit of customization that you may need to do.
Yes, because also probably in your heat structure, you would split that information off to a separate repository. So you'd have to fetch that repository as well and place it somewhere. So it goes to the realm of custom image making for you to tailor your needs then.
Yeah.
Unless someone comes up with a magical solution that works, then I mean that would be great.
Yeah, so the feedback that you have around these things is always valuable. We don't claim to have a perfect solution, but we do find that the current architecture that we have is resilient to improvement. So we can improve things without breaking stuff. We already did a lot of improvements all across the board, and that includes the GUI as well. So this is 1.1. I think one of the things that we did was like, if a hop is disabled, you will only see enable, and when it's enabled, only disables. So stuff like that. It's a small thing, but yeah, only showing the appropriate actions, smoothing things out across the board. I think it's just something that people will feel if they use the tool regularly and say, oh, well, there's a new version. Things improve. That's why you would download a new version, right? So let us know what your feedback is on any sort of topic, and you will find that the most critical people are we, the developers, who are all like constantly looking for things to clean up and improve, which is awesome. Community has been really on a roll lately, the last couple of weeks. I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's getting darker outside. Yeah. So this is what I had. I hope it was useful. I don't know if there are any other projects you guys want to show or showcase but I'm pretty much done.
Same question as always. I think if there are any topics you'd like to see covered in any of the next sessions, let us know here in the chat. Just shout, Twitter, Mattermost, whatever. Just let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about.
To my colleagues, David, Rodrigo, and everybody, thanks for joining. Thanks for testing Hop and for helping out. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for the presentation, Matt. It's always a pleasure.
We have cool new Neo4j improvements coming in the pipeline for the graph output transform, the dynamic relationship selector, self relationships, and node label selection based on input data. So those are hideously complicated, but they're worth building.
We have another question.
All right.
Stefan asks if we can do a deep dive on a Docker setup. So that's I think that's a separate session that.
Yeah, Hans was saying that he really wanted to do a session on that, if I recall.
I think I heard that too at some point.
You heard it as well, Mark? All right, that's...
Well, he already did the using Hop in Docker, so it's just a small step to setting up a Docker project.
So maybe because there's always a little bit of confusion around Docker and Docker Hop Web or Docker Incubator Hop and Incubator Hop Web, right? So those are the two images that we have. So maybe show the differences, how we can extend those, tailor to our own needs. Maybe explain how the integration tests run on Docker Compose. I think we have like a Kubernetes integration example somewhere as well,
Yeah,
if I recall correctly. So Helm chart, maybe something like that. What else can we drag along? Yeah.
Well, I think the sub question between brackets, the switch from local to Docker could be really interesting because well, there aren't that many projects that well, either they start directly in Docker or stay on a virtual machine or a physical server. But the switch from a local setup to a Docker setup could be interesting to cover as well.
What would be cool, Hans? So my colleagues have created like a whole project on Google Storage. So maybe we can do do a simple project on Amazon and then run a Docker container on the Amazon Kubernetes.
Custom container using a project in
No, standard container. You can use a standard container
Oh yeah,
because,
yep,
because you don't have to expose any metadata. The metadata can
Correct.
be read from S3.
correct.
Well, that was for Google Storage. I don't know how security works on the Amazon side.
API key.
Yeah, on,
Yep.
the Kubernetes hosts, the containers actually know the Google Cloud Project or something. There's some secret sauce involved. So in theory, you can just access Google Storage because it knows which project, it knows the service account, it knows the authentication, and then you can just read from it, right? But otherwise, yeah, expose the key in some way. But those would be really cool exercises, I guess, right?
Yeah, but probably more than one session actually. If we take
Yeah, we want
a
to
bit of
keep the
people in
sessions
Docker.
like in under an hour because the videos get a little bit long otherwise. I hope you found it useful, guys. Thanks for the awesome questions. And see you on the next Hop Hangout, I guess.
All right. Well, in again 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, let's keep them rolling.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Right.